podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body, which is advancing coaching in business, society, and worldwide. I'm your host, Maisie Barlow, and in this new series, I'm delighted to introduce you to experts, coaches, thought leaders, and individuals who share their passion for working with young people. Our aim is to inspire and challenge the preconceived ideas we may hold, while dissecting and examining our intrinsic ability to show up for the generations of our future. Raw life experiences shape this series, getting to the heart of why working with young people truly matters. Welcome everybody, and today we have the most wonderful guest on, Felicity Rose Sunderland Hall, who is a life coach. She's a trainer, she is a powerhouse of an individual and just has a huge amount to say for her young age. Welcome, Felicity.
Thank you. What an introduction. It's lovely to be here with you, Maisie. Thank you for having me.
So to kick things off, I'd really be interested, and I'm going to give you a massive, wide open question. So for anyone that sort of doesn't know who you are, could you tell me a little bit about your current setup? Where are you in the world? What's going on? In your own words.
Yeah, of course. So I am currently in the south of France in a very small village surrounded by vineyards near the sea, which is very peaceful and very lovely. I am a life coach. I trained about a year and a half ago, so maybe a bit longer than that actually. I graduated in June 2022 from my life coach training. And since then, have just been coaching as much as possible. I've started up my own company, and I also train life coaches with an amazing organisation called Mo that I've been working. They're also the company that I trained with. So yeah, absolutely love them, and have been working with people from loads of different backgrounds, all different ages, who just, come for a variety of reasons, and it just genuinely seemed to have quite life-changing experience by the end of the course.
Amazing. And you mentioned life-changing experiences, so I know you quite well, having spoken to you before. But for our sort of listeners out there, I'd be really keen to share with them what changed for you when you did your life coaching course, because I know that there was a big shift in life for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely. To be honest, it kind of feels strange looking back at it now, because it just feels like such a long time ago, and like so many things have changed since. But I basically discovered coaching because in all honesty, I saw an advert for some free coaching on Instagram that was with a wonderful charity called, I think it's called the Young Women's Trust, that focus on coaching women from the age of 18 to 30. And this advert kind of like came at the perfect timing for me, because I just graduated university in 2020. I had just done a year's work in like a big company in London. I've effectively like kind of ticked all of the boxes that I thought I wanted to achieve in my life. I had wonderful friends, I had a great partner, I had a beautiful apartment, and especially in 2020, where like so many people were being made redundant and so many companies were closing and stuff like that, the fact that I even managed to get a job was huge. So I kind of had this real mentality of I need to work really hard to build something for myself, build a career, and I just kind of went full blazing down this route. And after about a year, basically just had like a massive burnout. I was in like a team of 8 people, and 3 people had already gone off sick due to stress and had burnouts. So I think it was like the combination of the environment that I was in and also like my mental headspace. I just had this moment where I was just looking at my life and I was just thinking, can I see myself doing this until I retire, or something like this, being in this kind of environment and this kind of setup? And it was just genuinely one of the scariest thoughts that I think I've ever had. So I kind of knew that I didn't want to do that, and then had my burn off for signed off work for a couple of weeks and saw this advert on Instagram. And I never kind of believe in like adverts online, because I'm always like, oh, it's a trick or whatever. That's just whatever, one belief that I have. But I was like, I literally have nothing to lose. I don't even know anything about life coaching, but I definitely need to be asking myself some quite big questions that I just don't know the answers to right now and are quite scary. So I got life coaching with this amazing man called Tony Phillips. I think I had about 8 sessions over the course of about 5 months. And during those 5 months, I had quit my job. I'd moved back to the south of France. I had left all of my friends and family and just had completely changed what my day-to-day life looked like. I also got mentally stronger. I got a lot of like emotional growth during that period and got a lot healthier. And it was just the perfect combination and support that I needed to really kind of ask myself those big questions in a safe environment that I don't really think I'd let myself explore before. So then by the time that I had had my last coaching session, Tony, my coach, had kind of said to me, I think maybe you should look into training to be a life coach for more personal reasons, because I'm a very empathetic person and I feel things very strongly. And I've always had this thing where I've wanted to help people and like connect with people. I speak 3 languages and have just been obsessed with travel from like the youngest age, and all of my free time and money basically goes into travel because I love meeting people and seeing the way that they live their lives and learning from them and just seeing how everyone is unique in their own beautiful way. And life coaching and training to be a coach kind of enabled me to do that in a healthy way so that it wasn't impacting me, so that I could create some barriers and learn some tools so that I could let people have their experience without getting emotionally invested. So I really decided to do the training for personal reasons, really, just for my own growth and mental health and everything else. But then by about week 3 of the course, I was like, actually, this is something that I think I could do professionally. And by the end of the course, I was 100% sure that this was something that I wanted to pursue because I'd experienced the benefits of it myself and how it completely changed my life. I'd seen it happen on the course with the other people. And then since then, I've just had so many wonderful experiences and witnessed so many wonderful people grow and change because of life coaching.
Beautiful. So you said that you moved back to the south of France. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about kind of way back before the journey of coaching, because it sounds like you've sort of been a bit of a globetrotter.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I suppose it was kind of in my DNA because, I mean, both my parents love traveling and they actually met in Africa in their 30s. So it was kind of something that I grew up with, this idea that moving around and meeting people was a wonderful thing to do and a great opportunity. So when I was 5, my parents decided to leave London, and my mum was a lawyer and my dad was a stay-at-home dad. So they decided to just completely change lives and give us a very different upbringing where we could just run around my house and with our neighbours and be completely safe, and, you know, all the other reasons why they left. So I arrived here when I was 5, couldn't speak French, had absolutely no idea what was going on. And I stayed here, was at school here until I was about 15 in a French school. I mean, there was like 9 people in my year, so it was a very like close-knit and small class of people. I suffered from anxiety from a very young age. I had my first panic attack when I was 9. I always knew that there was things that maybe I needed to look at, but just didn't really know what they were or how to do that. So I was kind of always searching. I thought maybe the place was the problem as opposed to, I thought it was like external things as opposed to looking internally. So when I was 15, I decided to go to boarding school in a city about an hour away from where I am in the south of France. And after about a year, just had like my first batch of depression, realised that it really wasn't the right environment for me to be in, even though I had wonderful experiences there. Like, I'm not saying it was a bad experience altogether, but I was just looking in the wrong places to find the answers. So then had a complete switch from coming from like a very artsy and like liberal and open-minded space to go to a Catholic boarding school in Somerset in the south of England when I was 16, where I was for 2 years, which was a big shock on so many different levels, from the fact that I'd never had to wear a uniform before to thinking about university. I mean, I remember on my first day, I think it was one of the girls in my boarding house asked me what I wanted to study at university. And I was 16 at the time and had just never even considered the thought of going to university. It was a big shock on so many levels. I met wonderful people, I learned wonderful things, but still had like the lingering issues of mental health and anxiety and other things going on at the time. But I also think in a way, like, because I'd had anxiety from such a young age, it was kind of all that I knew. So I was kind of looking at my life and everything through those eyes without really realising that there was another way to be. And it was only through exploring it in coaching that I realised that there were other ways to be and other ways to look at things and tools that could help me kind of shift my mindset. So yeah, I went to boarding school, finished that when I was 18, took a year out to go travelling, worked my arse off for about 5 months, just doing as many jobs as I could, from cleaning to waitressing, everything, and then spent 3 months backpacking in Africa. Then I went to live in Madrid for a couple of months, then went to Malaysia. So I really just kind of travelled around as much as I could. And then went to university because that was kind of the only thing that I thought I would be able to do, or the thing that I had to do in order to have a successful future. Studied international business, had a 4-year degree, graduated, got a very good degree. I was very happy with it, and then just kind of followed down that route. So yeah, until that big moment came, and now here I am.
I'm hearing a path laid out almost by society, I suppose. I think we've had discussions before about this idea of these days it's almost expected of young people to follow the path of university if they want to get a job. It's a real shift in the way things always were, because obviously there were sort of more apprenticeships available and things like that. But it's fascinating that was you and it didn't satisfy you. You got to a point and thought, actually, I might be wrong in saying, but who am I living for? Whose life is it?
Yeah, completely. I think, to be honest, that was why I loved traveling so much, because it was the only time where I was able to, not the only time, but it was a time where I was allowing myself to be out of that societal mold, you could call it, and just be 100% by myself and do what I wanted to do.
Tell me a little bit about the Felicity when she's traveling.
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose she's a lot more aligned with who I am nowadays and have been for the past couple of years. One of my friends kind of describes it as like I'm constantly just having like a holiday romance with myself, just giving myself loads of self-love and doing things that I want to do, using my voice in a way that's aligned with who I am and my values. And I listen to myself now, and I have the tools to do that, which gives other people the space to listen to themselves. And I feel like it's kind of a mirroring effect. Whatever I give myself, it seems to kind of like ricochet out, and the people around me seem to treat me in the same way and treat themselves in a similar way, which is really beautiful. So there's a lot of like hope there. There's a lot of strength where I'm not afraid to kind of be afraid and just jump out of the airplane and just believe that I'm going to fly without really having any idea. I've just kind of blown my mind, really, achieving things that I never thought that I would, and just ending up in spaces that I never thought I would be. So it's just a very different, calm, accepting, peaceful energy around me.
Gorgeous. So I'm thinking back to, I suppose, the opportunities that you were afforded, and then being a little bit later in life. So you'd done the university and you'd given it this year at this job, and then you came across the coaching. So I'm really interested to know what you think might have changed for you if you'd had access, I suppose, to the coaching earlier on. What choices you might have made? It's a bit of an imagination game here.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it's something that I've definitely thought about quite a lot. Because like I said, I had struggles with my mental health, and I tried so many different things, from personal development seminars to therapy, to seeing practitioners for hypnosis or like energy work, or, you know, all of these beautiful things which have merit in their own way. And I'm definitely not saying that they don't, and they've played a massive part in my development. But it was always this thing where it was kind of like I was looking outside of myself to find something or someone who would be able to tell me what I should do, or what tools would help me, or just not really looking into myself and finding the answer for myself. And the coaching training that I did had a very kind of like holistic approach, where the main belief behind it is that everyone has their own answers in themselves. They just haven't maybe had the opportunity to kind of look at them or explore them or be asked the right questions. So yes, I think had I had that earlier on in life, then maybe my life would have taken a very different route. I'm obviously not saying that coaching wasn't around. I think maybe I just had no idea what it was, and it just wasn't necessarily something that was signposted to me, or, you know, to my friends or my family. You know, there was all of the other suggestions were things that people who cared about me had made, and they were beneficial. And I'm sure that had they known about coaching, they would have maybe suggested coaching. But yes, I have this belief that everything comes to us at the right time, and perhaps had I had coaching before, I might not have had the strength to look inwards or to make changes or whatever it is. I don't know, but I do think that coaching came to me at the right time for me anyway. But then had it come 5 years ago, then I may have thought the exact same thing, so who knows.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I think what you said there about sort of signposting and how do we almost create awareness for young people to say, actually, coaching isn't necessarily what you've got in your mind. I don't know how many young people actually know what coaching is. As you said, you might not have been in the place, or you might not have jumped at the opportunity, even if it was there. And yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of, I suppose, getting rid of that illusion and making it more of a pathway that young people could enter into?
I can speak from like my experience and my opinions. I'm definitely not an expert on the matter, but I'm currently working with an organisation called the Bridging Project, who focus specifically on coaching people in their first year at university. I think at the moment they're doing Oxford and Nottingham, and I think they're looking at branching out at other universities. And they offer free coaching to first year students who have come from maybe an underprivileged background, or maybe be the first person in their family to go to university. It's a big shift for most people to go to university, but obviously if you're coming from a family where people might not have had experience in it, or they might not be able to advise you or something. So it's just really to offer them that extra support. I know a couple of coaches who also kind of focus on coaching people in this age bracket, who even go to schools at like a sixth form level just to give talks to kind of spread the awareness about what it is. I just think it's just a general lack of knowledge that it's even out there, and the benefit that it can have on people's lives, how it's like very future focused. It meets people where they are and really just guides them on creating their own journey to where they want to go and how they're going to get there. So I know we've discussed this a little bit anyway, but like interestingly, there was actually coaching available at my university, but I only found out after I had actually done my coaching degree, because I'd done like some volunteering for a TED talk when I was at university, and I posted on LinkedIn about the fact that I had just, done this coaching course or something. And then the person who was running the TED talk at my university reached out and was like, oh, amazing, that's so cool that you've done that. I did live coaching at your university and all this stuff, and I just had absolutely no idea. So I think there's maybe something about actually, maybe at the start of terms or the start of the years or whatever it is, just offering it there as some kind of support. Like I know that there's signposts literally physically around most universities anyway, for therapy and guidance counsellors or careers counsellors or, lots of different things, but I don't remember seeing any for coaching, and had I might not have known what it was. So I think there's a general misconception anyway about coaching. It's definitely something that I've experienced when I talk about it with people around me, when I say I'm a life coach, and they just assume that it's kind of like almost like a mentor / sports coach. So I'm kind of like going to be giving people the answers as to how they're to live their best lives, I suppose. Which always kind of, they always kind of like look at me in a funny way, because they're like, you're 26 and I'm 54 and I have 3 kids. How are you going to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing to live a happy life? So I instantly kind of like drive straight in, and I'm like, I'm definitely not going to be telling you how to live your life or give you any suggestions. And if I do ever give you a suggestion, it'll be in a very safe way where we would have already created trust. I'll ask you for your permission. It's a very focused on the person having the coaching experience. I think there needs to be, not needs to be, but I think it could be very beneficial to spread just the awareness of the reality of what coaching is to all generations. Because realistically, if, parents are hearing about it, teachers are hearing about it, managers are hearing about it, then they could pass it on to the next generation.
Really interesting. Yeah. Just thinking about kind of that passing on of knowledge, almost the tools that you gain as a life coach, as you say, it's not something, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners would agree that it's not something that you have all the answers. I think these days, in order to market yourself as a coach, it's a really fascinating area, and I'm definitely not someone that's kind of got a marketing background, but the way that we kind of market ourselves as coaches and the way that other people have kind of blown up on social media. There's a lot of, I can get you a 10-figure salary, because I'm going to coach you and I'm going to be the one to make sure that you succeed. And I think there's this idea that's like banded around that if you give me your money, I can make you whatever you want to be. So I'd be interested to hear your opinions on that and maybe how we break that, especially for young people who are kind of so on social media and so looking at these things and thinking, oh, maybe that's how it works. Maybe I just need to give them my money.
Yeah. Oh, to be honest with you, I think that's such an interesting and wide topic. It's also a beautiful one where there's so much room for growth and discussion. I think specifically with like young people, like you said, having access to social media all the time, like it's, most people in that age bracket would have probably grown up with social media in one form or another, or having like constant access to what everyone else is doing and what everyone else's life looks like. There is a beauty in that and it does connect us all, but there's also a massive drawback where you never really know what is reality and what isn't reality. So there's obviously like that aspect of it. I think there's also an element of it where you can get amazing coaching for free. And I'm not saying that coaches shouldn't charge for their coaching, because I do think there's an element when people invest a certain amount financially, then maybe they are a bit more motivated, and it kind of tests if they are motivated to make that change and if they're ready to make that change. But I'm also saying that there is a massive space where coaching is available for free, especially if you think about people who are the younger generation who might not have the same amount of disposable income as someone who's maybe been working for 20 years or something. So I think there's an element of like looking at it there, just to say that there is options out there that can be very beneficial. It's such a big question, to be honest. It is really, really massive. Because in all honesty, I don't think that if my coaching had required financial investment, I would have done it, to be honest, because there was this kind of fear of, oh, this is just someone trying to take my money and I'm not going to get it might be a scam kind of thing was kind of the thing that I really was leaning into.
I suppose it's then giving credit for the younger generation probably being a bit more savvy than we are.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
we quite like to think, because, you know, we're young people that are now grown up in more grown up bodies and having had every experience that we've had, and that shaping kind of how we interact with the world. And it's really interesting for those that, young people that have grown up with it and have grown up with just being online. That is part of an identity that they create, form, shape, mould, and then interact with. So I think perhaps they don't look at they don't look at ads and things that are asking for money and think, oh, actually, maybe, as you say, they probably don't have the money to spend. So is there something around, I suppose it's kind of organisations that set up, as you said, the project that you're doing with universities, and the Moat Foundation do sort of free spaces for people that want to train as coaches. Is there something around organisations and them being a way in for young people?
I would like to think so. Obviously, if you think of like, bodies like the Association for Coaching that are kind of almost like setting a standard for good coaching. I don't want to say there's ever bad coaching, but, for setting a certain level. And I think that if you're interested in being a life coach, and in my opinion, if you want to do it for certain values that could be like helping people or making the world a better space or seeing change in the world as opposed to just financial reasons, then I'm not saying there shouldn't be the financial reasons too, but as opposed to just solely focusing on that, then I think that people may be drawn to things like organisations that have the connections, that have already created a network of coaches on varying, years of experience and on their own journeys of becoming coaches. You might be able to signpost you and point you in the direction of people who may have, just kind of graduated and just got their qualification and be looking to donate some hours for free. I mean, the Mo organisation, they do this thing called 10 for 10, which is literally like after you've graduated, you can give out 10 hours of coaching for free in exchange for just completing a questionnaire in the first session, and then another questionnaire at the end of the session just to evaluate if there's been any change and what kind of impact it's had. So the Bridging Project does it for free. Universify is another one that does it for free. There's definitely organisations out there that are looking to help people, and I think that's genuinely their motivation behind it and want to help people. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a financial investment later on or for like different things, or if you've got a very specific idea in mind of something that you might want to achieve. But if you're still in that exploration phase, I do think that there's spaces out there for people who are just looking for that. I think organisations play a big role in that, and that's why maybe the Association for Coaching also plays such a powerful role, because they can kind of, I don't want to say validate, but, assess different organisations and create a bit more of a stable playing field as to the level of the coaches that are out in the world, because it is obviously something that you can't get I assume you can get a degree in coaching, I don't really know, but it's not like a national wide qualification where if you're a life coach, then it means you've done so many years of training and you've had so many years of experience or whatever it is.
Oh, it's a really interesting one. I'm just going back a little bit to what you were talking about. So it was a way bit back, actually. You were talking about this idea of people thinking that maybe you're a mentor or you're someone that's going to sit and offer advice. I think for young people, and this is a debate that I have had during the series, is for young people, in a way, you've almost got to be a role model, because you are there as a figure, an authority figure. You've probably been brought in by an organisation, or you've been brought in by the school, or you've been brought in as an other that is the adult in the situation. So what are your thoughts on that kind of line between mentorship and coaching for young people? Or do you think that it can be done for young people? You can work with young people and do pure coaching?
Oh, that's such an amazing question. I suppose in a way I am kind of biased because of my age and the fact that I only graduated university maybe longer ago than I realised, but not that long ago. So I suppose when I have a conversation with someone going into university, I see myself as like a similar age bracket or like of a similar experience, and I don't necessarily see that distinction. So with that being said, for me anyway, it's been quite an easy transition to kind of step into that role. But also I think there's a massive amount of work that needs to go in at the very initial stage of where you're explaining to a student or a young person the expectations of what they can be able to expect from coaching and the format that it's going to take. So for me anyway, like I said, I make it very clear from the get-go I'm not going to be there to give them the answers. I will be there to create a safe space, to create a trusting environment where if they want to, they will grow and they will learn a lot of tools that could benefit them for the rest of their life. And, you know, all of those other things, we have like a really honest conversation to start with so that I can really make it clear that I will be there to support them and believe in them, but I'm also not going to give them the answers. And I think if a coach has that approach, then it doesn't really matter how old you are or your age or, I don't know, or your background or anything like that. As long as you're going in with those intentions and you have a certain amount of connection with the person and, you know, you feel in yourself that this is someone you want to coach and they also want to be coached by you, then I don't think there's any reason why your age should be an issue. But then, like I said, I'm 26. So maybe being a 40-year-old, I might have a very different opinion. I suppose my coach that I had to start with, I'm not 100% sure of his age, but he's older than me. And there was definitely like at least one generation between us. And I still felt incredibly empowered and like it was a space for me to find my own tools. And I think that empowerment side of it is really important to just make someone or encourage someone to believe that they have all the tools and the resources that they need inside themselves. And we just have to explore in order to get there.
Because I'm thinking in terms of mentoring, I suppose, it's a slightly different thing. It really is. It's that sort of showing up, oh, I've done this and this is how I got there. Whereas coaching is, how do you want to get to where you want to go?
Completely. To be completely honest, like I've had a lot of mentoring myself, you know, through the people around me, but also through like resources that I found online. Like I'm a massive podcast listener, like I love listening to podcasts and I love watching videos on self-help on YouTube and stuff like that. And I discovered Tony Robbins when I was like 18 and just listened to his motivational talks every morning when I was getting ready to go to university or whatever. And I do think that there is an element that you can save time by trying out ways that have been successful for other people, whilst also remembering that you can have two very similar people who've had very similar experiences, but the lessons that they can learn from it will be completely different. So I think there's probably room for both, and just not being afraid to explore ways that have worked for other people, but also whilst maintaining your own authenticity and being honest with yourself. Like if something doesn't feel right, then forcing yourself through it probably isn't the right way forward. Like I know, for example, for myself, if I'm ever stuck or procrastinating or anything, it's probably because I'm giving myself a bit of a hard time about not doing something. So the only approach that I can use in order to see movement and see progress, it kind of has to come from a place of love and encouragement and complete acceptance and just kindness. So I do think there is room for both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really nice what you said there, that, you know, there's seeing other people's journey is sometimes the motivation that you need, but actually, like you say, kind of following through and actually making change for you is, yeah, it has to start within. It has to start not because you're copying a formula, because we're all very, very unique. I mean, I had an image of a completely sort of blank slate, and the fact that, you know, we all start off completely blank-ish. And then we build, but every single nuance of every single day of life is making us who we are. So actually to say, okay, so now follow what so-and-so has said or follow what so-and-so has done, it's not always good. It might work to a certain extent, but it's not going to be your path. It's not going to be the thing that you follow because you've built those steps.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, it kind of boils down to even just having conversations with people who have a different opinion to you or have different cultural backgrounds or whatever you want to say. Like if you can have conversations with people and be honest about your opinions in a respectful way and also hear what they have to say, then you can see how that lands for you. And I assume it's kind of a similar thing with mentorship. You know, if someone says something and you're like, oh, actually that sounds really interesting, maybe I'll give that a go and see if that works for me, then give it a go. If someone says something and you're like, oh, actually that's a really interesting perspective, I hadn't considered that, but I don't think that really aligns with who I am or my values or whatever, then it is also a learning opportunity for it to reinforce your own beliefs or, you know, help you grow in a certain way. I do believe there's always a certain amount of room for exploration, but the decision kind of always, in my opinion, has to come from within.
100%. As you say, I mean, even as young people as well, who are forming their idea of themselves, their prefrontal cortex is still developing. You know, life is throwing 1,000,001 things at them and they're trying to navigate who they are in a world that they're sort of bombarded with comparison, I want to say, having to be something, do something, want something, but not actually knowing or not having the space maybe to interrogate themselves, ask themselves, does mean that, yeah, coaching is such a unique tool in that respect, because it creates this space for them to dream, I want to say.
Yeah. No, completely. It really does kind of enable people to look past their wildest dreams in a way, and, you know, and almost like break some barriers or some beliefs that, or like, you know, negative beliefs that they might have had that might have been limiting in their lives. And it is such a beautiful, powerful space. There is definitely this element of, I think maybe of social media, like you said, of that means that it's constantly available for you to compare and just look what everyone else is doing next to you. And for someone who, like myself, who may have been struggling with mental health issues or whatever, it can also be a very mean tool to be like, oh, look, this person's living their dream and doing all these wonderful things. And, you know, the idea of getting out of bed in the morning and brushing my teeth feels like a massive task. And it can be a real tool to be like, oh, what is wrong with me? So there is kind of that element of it where you can compare yourself in such a negative way. But I think it really just depends on your mindset and where you are at the moment. It can also be a beautiful way to compare yourself in the future and be like, and create hope to be like, okay, so this person has had a relatively similar experience to me. They've clearly spent some time working on themselves and been able to get to where they want to get to. So it does create a certain amount of hope at the same time. I think especially like young people nowadays, this idea of just always having your phone with you. And I think there's like a Michael McIntyre sketch, who's a British comedian, where he talks about this idea of like, imagine that your phone wasn't actually your phone and you just left every day and brought all of your music with you in your car and every single photo that you've ever taken. And you've brought a calculator and a torch and a radio so that you're always and a talkie-walkie so that people can always reach you 100% of the time. You know, it's becoming part of a lot of people's daily lives to constantly have their phone with them. And I can imagine, like my parents' generation, that definitely wasn't the case. You know, they had to walk to like phone booths if they wanted to speak to each other. So I think it's also kind of, it's brought us a lot, but I think it's also meant that we're constantly able to be distracted if we want to, and maybe not encouraged to use that time in a way that's going to enable people to self-explore.
You know, it's a massive subject to cover, but I mean, there's statistics that, you know, young people are suffering with mental health problems more and more and more. Obviously, this sort of rise in technology has been probably a part to play in it. Life moves, technology moves with it. I think it's important to stop. I'm almost encouraged to reach out to anyone that's got a child or works with children and say, remind them that, you know, what they're seeing online isn't real. It's not always real. It's the snapshots. It's the best part of whatever's going on in their life. And I'm sure, you know, as parents, that's part of their vocabulary. I'm sure it's something that we do teach our young people, but I think it's really needed. And it makes me think about cultivating space for them to actually not be connected to a phone, not be connected to anything but another human being. In that moment, it's probably quite overwhelming, quite scary for some young people. Because to have that level of interaction without distraction will put them in quite a vulnerable position.
Completely. Even just this idea that people can always reach you. I think, not like, for example, young people who are just starting out with work, for example, this idea that your work phone is always there. It might not teach them the healthiest boundaries to be like, okay, well, I'm leaving the office, so work is staying there, or I'm leaving wherever it is that I work. If you're constantly able to be reached by your colleagues or your manager or something, then it might not teach them the best tools to be able to have that separation and create those boundaries. And I know for me, it definitely had an impact on me leading to burnout, because obviously it was a different time. I was working from home because it was COVID for a lot of my time at work. But yeah, I mean, I was probably doing an extra hour in the morning and then maybe 2-3 hours extra in the evening a day, because there was this thing of it's always there and I can always do it and I can always get a head start. But there was just always more that needs to be done. And I hadn't learned that separation tool that I needed in order to be like, it's okay for you to stop when you need to stop, and it's okay to be feeling how you're feeling and to be tired, and you don't have to be waking up at 5 a.m. every day so that you can work. So yeah, I think there's a lot of beauty in that, but there's also a lot of room for improvement.
Definitely. So just sort of reflecting on what we've talked about so far, because it's just a beautiful conversation, and yeah, really nice to delve into different bits and really put ourselves in the shoes, I suppose, of the young people growing up today, because we don't know. We really don't. And we can hazard a guess, and we can kind of, you know, still a young person myself. But I'm definitely not the generation that's having to deal with this explosion of technology.
I mean, it's quite interesting, like the work that I'm doing with the Bridging Project specifically. We have like a monthly meetup with the different coaches, and we have like quite a lot of training at the start to talk about some of the topics that might come up, that the coaching might bring up, and how we can, best navigate that and encourage them to learn tools to manage it. But it's stuff like, imposter syndrome, comparison, feeling insecure, not knowing how to have social interactions, or not having the confidence to try different societies or different activities, or to go places on their own, or, being alone, and all of those kind of things. And it's a very interesting time, because I don't think those things are specific to young people. They may be more, I don't know, maybe they are, but I wouldn't imagine that they are. So I imagine the beauty of being able to teach young people the tools as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, so that when they have their first job, or when they move to another city or another place by themselves, or they go traveling by themselves, or whatever it is, they've already got this beautiful skill set that they can, dip in to support them on their route, as opposed to learning them as, I don't know, a 40-year-old. And it's never too late to learn. And there's always beauty in the journey that takes you on that learning process. But my God, I know that if I had learnt them a little bit younger, then they would have been very beneficial for me.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So obviously the work that you're doing, the Bridging Project, which is sort of points me on to my next question, which is, and we've kind of discussed it, but I'm going to go a bit deeper. I'm going to keep digging, because I'm really interested in how we bridge the gap between young people that could benefit from coaching and how do they actually get it. What are your thoughts on that?
It's very, very interesting. I think there's so many different levels that could be looked at, like you said, from the first one of like passing on knowledge. So making society as a whole more aware of coaching and the benefits that it can have, whether that's through digital marketing or through making books available at the library. I don't know, I'm not saying there isn't, but just kind of like passing on that knowledge in a way that's really accessible to everyone that wants to find it. I think there's also something that could be looked at from the university or the school's point of view, that perhaps we could have ambassadors who could approach them directly, just kind of mentioning some of the benefits that coaching can have on students and the projection of their life and where they want to go. I think it could be the same in companies. I'm not saying that there aren't these things available, but I'm just saying like there's always room for improvement. Managers could have training to not necessarily be coaches, but, at least to improve listening skills, or how to treat their employees as individuals in the most effective way, so that even from a business perspective, they're getting the most efficient, best version of their employee coming into work every day. Also for the employee's perspective to enjoy going into work every day and feeling space for that. I also guess there's something in, maybe like national health services. Like I know I have a friend in the UK specifically who is a link worker, who basically, once someone gets signed off by a GP to go have some kind of like mental health support, or they've, signed themselves off to have mental health support, then they could be sent to a link worker who will assess all of their different needs and then make suggestions based on what they're going through and what kind of support they might need, and point them in the right direction. I think link workers is quite a new job. I think they've only been around for like maybe less than 5 years from what I understand from my friend. But I think if even like they were more aware of life coaching and the benefits that it could have, then it could literally like direct people in that situation to a community of people who are there and willing and able and want to help. There's so many different ways of looking at it. I mean, I know, for example, like in America, people say that coaching is far more advanced than it is in the UK. I can say that coaching, from my experience, is definitely a lot more advanced in the UK than it is in France, especially where I live. So I think maybe it's just a question of time and belief, and hopefully there'll be more coaches coming through the pipeline and keep spreading the message. And who knows, maybe eventually it'll be something that you could study at university if you wanted to. You could study to be a coach. I don't really know the answer to it, to be completely honest. I think it's such a broad thing, but I do feel like very hopeful, because it is just a ripple effect, really. If someone's experienced the benefit of coaching, then they might talk about it to someone else, and then eventually, hopefully, everyone will be aware that this support is there and available. So I suppose it's also empowering people to be honest about their experiences and discuss some of the issues that they're having and some of the tools that they've found that have been beneficial for them. It definitely impacts many different levels of society and different infrastructures and organisations. Specifically to young people, I think it's just encouraging, well, at the moment anyway, my mindset is just encouraging organisations that are focusing on helping that age bracket specifically, whether that's offering your time or investment or supporting them mentally and morally or sending them good thoughts.
Because as you say, they do exist. There are organisations out there that do exist. So tapping into them and giving, I'm hearing a lot about I'm getting this feeling that actually it takes not just the coaches, it's the people that have been impacted by coaching to have those conversations and to say, actually, this is something that really helped me, and being able to, if you've worked with a young person maybe, and how do we encourage rather than tell them that they have to, how do we encourage further discussions? And I think, as you say, they kind of happen organically. They do happen naturally because hopefully, having had some coaching sessions, they'll be in a better mental place and they'll be able to, navigate things a little bit more clearly. And so therefore, they'll let other peers know that that's what they've had. I'm just thinking, and this is maybe a little bit of a controversial question, but and maybe we've already touched on it, but I'm just thinking about the sort of dangers of people calling themselves a coach and working with young people. It happens in every industry. I think there's going to be bad apples, but maybe we could have a think about what to do to sort of mitigate against that.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, very interestingly, it's something I was actually discussing yesterday with my partner, because I was saying that's why I think organisations like the Association for Coaching are so important, because it does kind of help people find coaches that may have had some kind of, I'm not saying you need to have had training. And in my opinion, my training was incredibly beneficial and I wouldn't be here without it. But it just helps unify the standards, I suppose, in one way or another. That's definitely how I see it anyway. And it's a very interesting and dangerous topic at the same time. A lot of the people that I've seen come through the course, one of their first kind of worries or things that they discuss or bring up to us as coaches is that they don't want to do anyone any damage. They don't want to make anyone feel worse. They don't want to, have a negative impact on the people that they're coaching, which I think speaks into their values and probably speaks into the kind of person that Mo attracts, as a side note. But I also think that it kind of shows that there are a hell of a lot of good coaches out there who do have the best intentions and who are looking to have a good ripple effect. Obviously, no one's perfect and we're all going to make mistakes and we're all going to learn from that. But I think specifically when it comes to younger people, because like you said, our brains are still developing, potentially some of the things and tools and experiences that we have at the younger age could impact us for the rest of our lives. So it's how do we find a way of minimizing that and making sure that that's not, just minimizing it and trying to stop it from happening as much as we possibly can. Maybe it's looking into creating courses or having discussions like this podcast about some best practices that you could bring with young people. I suppose it's probably also talking to the young people themselves and finding out what they found helpful, what best resonated with them and their experience, and then growing on that. I know, for example, like I mentioned, I had a very holistic training and coaching where my main role was to listen, create a safe space and just help the person learn about themselves. Whereas from the feedback that we've received from previous students who have, then gone on to do their second and third years of universities, they said that they actually really enjoyed hearing more from the coach's personal life and hearing a bit more about who they were as a human being, and that it really created that trust. So maybe it's, a shift in the coaching mindset, perhaps for younger people, and saying, maybe making yourself a little bit more open and available about some of your experiences could help create that environment and also enable younger people to think, actually, this person, from the way that they're expressing themselves or the things that they're saying, might not be the best coach for me, or maybe the best coach for me. Could be something to look at there.
Really interesting. I mean, it's something that's come up with other guests, is this idea of kind of authenticity and honesty, and something that you have to have when working with young people. I think you have to have an, certain amount of it when working as a coach, because as you say, you kind of leave the ego at the door and say, we're creating something together and you're the driver. But it is this idea with young people, it really is important for us to kind of be a little bit more vulnerable and say, yeah, things have affected me as well. Or, I've been through X, Y, Z. And that's, I suppose, goes back to the line that we were talking about between this kind of mentorship. So maybe it's not, this is how you should do it. I suppose maybe it is a bit of a line It's got to be a bit of a wibbly wobbly line, and we've got to bend a little bit into sharing a little bit more of ourselves when working with young people, which sounds a bit counterintuitive when I say it, because you automatically think when you're working with young people, I know what I'm talking about, they don't. Or that might be the kind of assumption of people that have never done it. But actually, I suppose what I'm learning, and having worked with, some young people myself, what I have learned is that actually it's the complete opposite. The complete opposite. You've got to make yourself really vulnerable and opaque almost in order to, show up and let them be them, because they have to feel safe.
Completely. I think it kind of ties into what we were saying a little bit before, but like maybe specifically even more with young people. It's whatever you're bringing into the space and mirroring, you may be enabling them to do the same thing. I think specifically like because of the way that we're maybe raised, we are maybe taught to kind of maybe follow by example a little bit, or wait for someone else to take the lead. Or I'm not saying this is the same for everyone, but for a lot of people, even as adults, it can be quite an uncomfortable situation to have someone say, well, this space is completely yours. You can use it however you want. So I can imagine as like an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old or even younger, that may be even more of an alien environment to be in. So I think it's maybe just maintaining that mindset that everyone is an individual, but at the same time, just bringing a bit more of yourself and your personality and your authenticity and transparency in specifically at the start of the sessions, maybe when you're around that contracting phase, when you're looking at what you're going to be working on together, just so they can see you doing it and hopefully eventually feel that they're in a space where they can do it themselves. But at the same time, maintaining that balance so that it is also their space. So you're not, do you know what I mean? It's definitely not black and white.
No, it's a difficult thing to explain, isn't it? Unless you're doing it, unless you're actually creating that space. And it, like you say, it's a balancing act.
Completely.
I think what really struck me about what you just said as well is, we are all different and we all do have our own kind of set of circumstances. And I suppose this would be an interesting one to ask you, having grown up in kind of different cultures. What would you say the perception of coaching is, having lived in multiple different sort of cultures, and what are the differences? What are the same things?
Such a great question. There's a lot of things to consider when you look at, for example, the environments that I was in when I was in England. They were predominantly cities. People's aspirations tended to be a bit more career focused, and the environments that we would spend our time with tended to be a bit more indoors and a bit more officey, a bit more, that kind of side of things. Whereas here, where I am in France, like I said, it's a very small village where, like a lot of my best friends who are my age, their main aspirations in life were to have a family from a really young age. And I'm not saying either is right or wrong or better or anything. It's just I kind of grew up with this massive contrast between people who were saying to me, well, if you don't go to university and, get a degree, then you're not going to be able to get a job and you're going to struggle for the rest of your life. And people who were saying to me, well, if you're not pregnant by the age of 22, then you're going to be a really old mum. So there was definitely some quite contrasting societal implications and things going on around me, which was quite an interesting thing to navigate as an individual anyway. But I think especially in terms of coaching, I have coached people in England and in English, and I have coached people in France and in French. And I think even just down to the detail of the way that the languages are structured has a massive impact. Like in English, with the training that I did anyway, we were like really encouraged to ask them really open questions and to not lead, and almost like time travel into projecting about what's it going to be like when you've achieved this, and really kind of painting that picture. And my experience with the people around me anyway, in England, people have a slight idea around what coaching is. From my experience, that definitely seems to be something that if I say to people, I'm a life coach, they go, oh, okay, cool. So they kind of know what it is, even though most people don't really seem that interested, which is completely fine. But in France, I tend to get a very different look, which is kind of more in tune with the one I was saying earlier, where people kind of look at me and think, who do you think you are as a 26-year-old to be telling me how to live my life, or have absolutely no idea what it even means. And, I kind of say to them and that I basically get to listen to people for a living, create their lives. And one of the first things that I would say to them is I would ask them this question, and I'd say, how satisfied are you with your life out of 10? And even just kind of entering into that realm where I'm not necessarily coaching them, but I'm just giving them a glimpse as to what it is and enabling them to think, seems to kind of soften the perspective a little bit, where they're like, oh yeah, okay, I'd never really thought about that. That's quite interesting. So I do think there's massive differences culturally. But like I said, also in terms of like the way that the language is actually structured, like if I was to ask someone of a similar age to me here what it's going to be like when they achieve their dream, or when they figure out what their dream even is, or the happiest day of their life or something, they don't seem to be able to kind of like express it in a variety of words. Maybe it's just me because I haven't done training in French, and I'm not kind of creating that space where they feel like they can be completely open, but it's always like, oh yeah, it'll just be really good. And then that's kind of where it stopped. I don't know if they've necessarily got the same language around emotions, or maybe it's not taught about, or maybe it's not spoken about in the same way here as it might be in the places that I've been to in the UK, where one of the exercises that I like to do is to bring this list of like 50 different emotions that I have in English and in French, and it's got a little giraffe on the top and it's very sweet. And I'll ask my coachees, I'll say to them, how many of these emotions could you recognize and define and differentiate? And, you know, if they're that way inclined, I might even say to them, where do you think you would feel them in your body? And it's been a very interesting experience, even just for me, to realize the differences between the cultures, that some people in France might be able to name 5 or recognize 5 of them. Some of them might be a little bit more, obviously, but it's an interesting one to compare.
It's fascinating. I'm shocked almost, because, you know, my idea of French and French people and the French language is that it's emotive and full of romance, but maybe that is just a stereotype that I've curated in my mind.
Oh, no, I do think there is a massive element there. Like I'm not saying that it's the same across all of France. Obviously, it may just be the kind of environment that I'm in. It's definitely a very romantic culture. In one sense, it is a very high emotional culture where they feel things very strongly and they're not afraid to express themselves, you know, whereas opposed to the English culture, which might be slightly more reserved and not necessarily so open about their emotions, maybe. It's definitely been an interesting one for me too, to kind of like compare my beliefs that I had about the French culture with the ones that I've kind of witnessed around me. But I will say that a couple of weeks ago, I went for a weekend away with one of my friends, and she had invited lots of her friends from Paris and who had actually studied in France and who had done like a higher education. And they seemed to have heard a little bit more about coaching than perhaps my friends and people around me here had. So it may also be like a location thing, because we are in the middle of this beautiful countryside. Maybe people don't need life coaching in the same way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about sort of environments as well. And even as simply put as city living to countryside living. And I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, inner city kids that have grown up in the city and they have lived that life versus kids that have had that kind of more rural experience, shall we say. I don't know whether you've got any kind of differences in maybe young people that you've worked with that have got very different outlooks on life because of where they've been brought up.
Oh, that's such an interesting question. In full transparency, a lot of the people that I have worked with I seem to have attracted them, or they seem to have attracted me, because we have had relatively similar life experiences, in the fact that they may have lived abroad, or they may have parents who have different nationalities or different languages even, or, you know, they may have kind of grown up or, you know, just been exposed to the differences that you could have from being outside of just not just one environment, but, you know, specifically just living in a city or just living in the countryside or something. So it's not something that I could really speak into myself. But I suppose in a way that's one of the things that I love about coaching, is that it's also the people that seem to find me and the people that I seem to find seem to align with my experience. Not that it really matters, because I think that you can pretty much coach anyone on anything if you've got the right intentions and the right tools. But obviously, I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me on that. I think, you know, some people think that it's much better to kind of niche down and have a really specific ideal client, which I'm not disagreeing with. Maybe I'll get to that stage one day myself. But for the moment, I'm loving the natural kind of flow of the people that are coming my way. But they do seem to have a bit more similar experiences to me than not. Let's put it that way.
Interesting. I mean, it's what you said about this kind of, I want to say cultural, like the identity or culture has something to play in, you know, who they are and their upbringing. And it's amazing how people find us.
Yeah.
Having not really known our story, don't really know kind of where we've come from. And as you say, it's sort of organically happening. And it's also amazing to hear that you're in this explorative phase of life where you're just going, do you know what? Actually, I'm just going to let whatever happens happen. And yeah, it's important, I think, as coaches that we kind of don't pigeonhole ourselves. I think, as you say, people have an idea. I'm curious to know the kind of age demographic of some of your clients.
The youngest client, I suppose, that I've ever had, as opposed to saying the youngest person I've coached, because I like to coach people of all ages, even my little godson who's like 3. But the youngest person who they probably, who've consented to having a coaching session with me, I think was probably 18, if not just shy of 18. And the oldest person was my lovely grandma, who he was obviously in her, like, almost 80s, 90s kind of area. So the demographic that I suppose I typically tend to work with tend to be on around like that age of 18 to maybe like 35. But that doesn't mean that I haven't coached people of an older age. The only thing that I seem to have noticed is that there tends to be a couple of trends, whether it's that they're in a transitional phase of their life. So whether it's moving country, moving jobs, going to university where there's quite like external changes happening around them, or they're kind of like at that phase where they just have a completely white page and just have absolutely no idea what to put on it. So it is more of like an explorative process. And the beauty that comes along with that, even if they have no idea what they want to get out of it by the end of it, if their goal is to just have an idea, then it's a beautiful way to start. There's always kind of those themes of like people wanting to see some kind of change or wanting to see some kind of progress without necessarily knowing what they are.
There's a shift in mind.
Exactly. There is a shift in mind.
Yeah. And I suppose, coaching is the best tool to support you in that, because it's giving you the space to navigate the shift.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I absolutely love coaching people one-to-one, but it's also, there's something beautiful about training people to be life coaches, and by the end of the course they're witnessing them coaching each other. And it's something I had an assessment day yesterday where we released 12 new life coaches out into the world to spread their light and do all their beautiful work. But I kind of got to me at the end of the day, I was thinking, like, how often are we in spaces where you can have a group of, let's say 16 adults who, have their own lives and responsibilities and everything going on, and they can literally just be completely honest and share and let their emotions out if they want to. Or do you know what I mean? Maybe I just haven't been around those environments very much, but it was just beautiful to witness and to be a part of that and know that there are spaces like that in the world. It really warms my heart.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. It's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to give you some space really to just, I suppose, shout about anything that you've got coming up, any areas that you would like to explore or develop, like pockets that you might want to reach into.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, yeah, I suppose the biggest things for me coming up at the moment are kind of like launching my coaching business, which is called FRSH Coaching. So it stands for my name, but also future results start here, which is I love because it kind of came to me in a dream. At the moment, I'm just kind of like working on getting that out there in the world in terms of like marketing and communication and making it as successful as possible. Huge shout out to like the Mo Foundation, which stands for Me, Others, Everyone Foundation. If you're looking to learn to have a bit of a deep dive into yourself and learn some skills that could probably help you in every element of your life, whether that's your own relationship with yourself or with your children or your partner or your boss or your colleagues or nature, or so many different tools that you could learn from studying to be a life coach. Also to the Bridging Project for their amazing work that they're doing. And yeah, I suppose also like I'm going to be branching in. I've got a mental health first aid course coming up. I have actually already done one and it did teach me so much, and I recognized myself in so many of the things that I was learning. I'm looking into maybe leaning into that space a little bit more, because I do think that if like managers or companies are more aware of ways of supporting their employees, then it can be very beneficial from all aspects, like I mentioned earlier. And in all honesty, like I wouldn't be where I am if a mental health first aider hadn't just been there to listen to me and say to me, whatever you're going through, is your experience and you're completely allowed to share and be honest. And if something's not okay, then something's not okay, and that's fine. And I wouldn't have gone down that journey of looking for help or support if I hadn't had that first experience. So there's also an element of me that wants to kind of be able to give back. Watch this space.
Amazing. Amazing. How might people get in touch with you if they want to?
So at the moment, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn, either with my name or with the name of the company. I'm also do have a Instagram page and a Facebook page, which are available for you to contact me, but they are kind of still in the works in terms of creating the beautiful message that I want to share and learn from and put out into the world. And yeah, eventually, hopefully there will be a website, which will be frshcoaching.com. I love just to have other interactions with other coaches and learn from other people and just hear about people's experiences. So please feel free to reach out, even if you just want to have a nice chat around a cup of tea or a cup of coffee about coaching.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Felicity, for coming on and just sharing some of your own journey, which I'm sure will be really, really beneficial for any listeners out there that are either interested in working with young people or already are. It's really, really valuable. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for the beautiful work that you're doing.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the Association for Coaching and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our new digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, signature programs, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events to help you develop and increase your coaching expertise.